I pushed you away for 3 months, criticized every effort you made, rejected every attempt at reconciliation. Then you finally stopped trying. And the moment you accepted my rejection, I realized I'd been testing whether you'd fight for us, not asking you to actually give up. The silence that followed your surrender felt like the death of something I didn't know I still wanted alive. I'm going to show you the 5 conflicting emotions women experience when you stop fighting for the relationship, and how to navigate the complex space between persistence and respect for boundaries. The shock of acceptance. Your peaceful acceptance of our ending felt more devastating than any fight we'd ever had. For months, I'd grown accustomed to your resistance to my distance, your attempts to bridge the gap I kept creating, your refusal to let me push you away completely. Your persistence had become proof that what we had was worth fighting for, even when I couldn't fight for it myself. When you finally said, "I understand you need space, and I'm going to respect that," my stomach dropped. The finality in your voice was something I'd never heard before. Not anger, not hurt, just acceptance that I'd made my choice and you were honoring it. The shock wasn't that you stopped trying. It was that your acceptance felt like agreement that I wasn't worth the effort anymore. For the first time, someone was giving me exactly what I'd been asking for, and I discovered I'd never actually wanted it. Day 1, after your acceptance, I checked my phone 47 times waiting for the text that didn't come. My body had become trained to expect your reach-outs, your check-ins, your refusal to let my walls stand permanently. The silence felt like abandonment disguised as respect. What I realized through therapy? I had been using rejection as a way to test the strength of our connection, not as a genuine request to end it. Your persistence had been my evidence that our relationship mattered enough to fight for. And your acceptance felt like confirmation that it didn't. Understanding her conflicted response, when someone stops fighting after months of pushing them away, the relief might be accompanied by unexpected grief for the loss of someone who cared enough to persist through rejection. What doesn't help? Immediately moving on or dating someone new, which confirms that your acceptance wasn't about respecting her boundaries, but about finding someone easier to love. What helps? Clear communication about the difference between respecting her choice and giving up on caring about her. I'm respecting your need for space, but that doesn't mean I stopped caring about you or what we had together. My chest tightened every morning when I realized you weren't going to text. Not because I wanted to reconcile, but because I'd lost the security of knowing someone was willing to keep trying, even when I couldn't try myself. But shock was just the beginning of my complex reaction to your acceptance. The relief mixed with regret. Part of me felt free for the first time in months, while another part mourned the loss of your devotion. Your acceptance removed the pressure I'd felt to figure out what I wanted, to make a decision about our future, to either recommit fully or end things definitively. The constant weight of your hope and my inability to meet it finally lifted from my shoulders. But the relief came with unexpected grief. Grief for losing someone who had seen enough value in our connection to persist through my rejection. Someone whose love had been strong enough to withstand months of my emotional unavailability. Week 1, I felt lighter than I had in months, able to focus on work without the background stress of disappointing you daily. But I also felt hollow, like something essential had been removed from my life structure without my permission. Week 2, I started mourning not the relationship itself, but the intensity of caring that your persistence had represented. You had loved me enough to fight for us when I couldn't, and losing that level of devotion felt like losing a part of myself I'd taken for granted. The internal conflict this creates, simultaneously grateful for the freedom from relationship pressure, while devastated by the loss of someone who had seen enough worth in me to persist through my worst emotional phases. My therapist helped me understand this as ambivalent attachment grief, mourning the loss of security that came from being fought for, even when that fight felt overwhelming while it was happening. Understanding the complexity. When someone stops fighting after persistent rejection, the relief can coexist with genuine loss, not because they want the relationship back, but because they've lost evidence of their own worthiness of persistent love. One increases the regret, moving on quickly or seeming happy to be free from the difficult relationship, which makes her feel like her pushback was justified and you were just looking for an excuse to leave. What honors the complexity? Acknowledging that caring for someone doesn't end just because trying to be with them does. I'm not fighting for us anymore because I respect your choice, but I want you to know that my care for you doesn't just disappear because we're not together. My throat burned for weeks whenever I thought about how hard you'd tried before giving up. Not because I wanted you to keep trying, but because I missed feeling like someone's first priority, even when I couldn't make them mine. The relief-regret combination was confusing enough, but deeper emotions were emerging. The abandonment panic. Your respectful acceptance triggered the exact abandonment fears that had caused me to push you away in the first place. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent months creating distance because I was afraid of being left, and your healthy response to that distance felt like the abandonment I'd been trying to prevent through self-protective rejection. My nervous system couldn't distinguish between he's respecting my boundaries and he's giving up on me. Both felt like confirmation that I was too difficult to love, too much work to keep fighting for, destined to be left alone with the walls I'd built to protect myself. Week 3, I found myself wanting to reach out just to test whether you still cared, to see if your acceptance was permanent, or if you'd be willing to fight again if I gave you an opening. The urge to create contact felt desperate and humiliating. Week 4, I started interpreting your respect for my boundaries as evidence that you hadn't really loved me as much as I thought. If you had truly cared, wouldn't you have kept trying? The logical part of my brain knew this was unfair, but my abandonment wounds felt raw and confirmed. If you're watching this because someone pushed you away and now you're questioning whether to keep trying or let go, subscribe now. What I reveal next shows how complex the psychology of rejection and acceptance becomes when attachment trauma is involved. The abandonment panic creates impossible expectations. Wanting someone to respect your boundaries while also wanting them to refuse to accept your rejection. Needing space while also needing proof that they won't use that space to disappear permanently. Understanding the deeper wound. When someone has abandonment trauma, healthy responses to their push-away behavior can trigger the same fear that caused the pushing away, creating a cycle where no response feels safe or loving. What feeds the abandonment panic? Any signs that you're moving forward with your life, dating other people, or seem relieved to be free from the complications of loving someone with attachment issues. What soothes the abandonment fear? Consistent care that doesn't require relationship reconciliation. I'm not fighting for us to get back together because I respect your choice, but I'm not disappearing from caring about you either. You matter to me whether we're together or not. My heart raced every time I saw your name on social media. Not because I wanted to get back together, but because I needed evidence that you still existed in the world as someone who had once fought for me, even if you weren't fighting anymore. The abandonment panic was revealing something even deeper about my relationship with love itself. The unworthiness confirmation. Your acceptance felt like proof that I had been right about myself all along. I wasn't worth the fight. Deep down, I had been testing whether you would love me through my worst behaviors, my emotional unavailability, my rejection of your efforts. Your persistence had been evidence that maybe I was wrong about being unlovable. Your acceptance felt like confirmation that I was right. The voice in my head that had always whispered, "You're too much work, too complicated, too damaged for anyone to stick around," felt validated by your healthy decision to stop fighting for someone who kept rejecting your efforts. Month 2, I convinced myself that your acceptance proved you had never really loved me as much as you claimed. Real love would fight forever, wouldn't it? The rational part of my brain knew this was unfair and unhealthy, but the wounded part felt like your boundaries were evidence of my fundamental unlovability. The twisted logic this creates: if you keep fighting, you really love me. If you stop fighting, you never really loved me. Either way, I get to protect myself from the vulnerability of believing I might actually be worthy of healthy, sustainable love. This is what my therapist calls unworthiness confirmation bias, interpreting healthy responses to unhealthy behavior as proof that the unhealthy behavior was justified, rather than seeing it as an opportunity for growth and healing. The devastating cycle: using rejection to test love, then using the eventual healthy response to that rejection as proof that you weren't worthy of love in the first place, which justifies more rejection in future relationships. Understanding her impossible position. When someone has deep unworthiness wounds, both fighting for them and respecting their boundaries can feel like confirmation that they're unlovable. One, because you eventually give up. The other, because you don't care enough to ignore their wishes. What reinforces unworthiness? Any indication that you're happier without the complications of loving someone with attachment issues, or that you found someone easier to be with. What challenges unworthiness beliefs? Consistent care that doesn't depend on relationship status. I stopped fighting for us because I respect you too much to ignore what you're telling me you need. That doesn't mean you're not worth fighting for. It means you're worth loving in the way that feels safe for you. My self-worth crumbled every time I remembered how hard you tried before accepting my rejection. Not because I wanted you back, but because I'd lost the one piece of evidence I had that someone could see past my defenses to something worth persisting for. But underneath all the pain was the most unexpected emotion: the gratitude and growth. Months later, I realized your acceptance had been the greatest gift you could have given both of us. Your refusal to keep fighting for someone who kept rejecting you hadn't been abandonment. It had been the boundary that forced me to confront my own patterns and take responsibility for the walls I'd built around love. For the first time, I had to sit with my own choices without the distraction of managing someone else's reaction to them. Your acceptance created space for me to understand why I'd been pushing away the very connection I claimed to want. Month 3, I started therapy specifically to understand why your healthy response to my rejection had felt so devastating. Through that process, I began to see how I'd been using rejection as a way to control the relationship, to test love without risking genuine vulnerability. Month 6, I felt profound gratitude for your strength in not enabling my unhealthy patterns. Your persistence had allowed me to avoid facing my own fears about intimacy. Your acceptance forced me to either heal or stay stuck, and I chose healing. The growth this created, learning to see love as something that could exist without games, tests, or proving through persistence. Understanding that healthy love respects boundaries, even when honoring those boundaries feels painful for both people. What I learned about myself: I had been more afraid of being truly seen and accepted than I was of being rejected. Pushing you away had been a way to avoid the vulnerability of letting someone love me without conditions or tests. The unexpected gift. Your acceptance taught me that real love sometimes looks like letting go, and that someone could care about me enough to honor my choices, even when those choices push them away. Understanding the deeper lesson, when someone stops fighting after persistent rejection, it might not be giving up on love. It might be loving in a healthier way than fighting for someone who isn't ready to be fought for. What this taught me about healthy relationships? Love doesn't prove itself through persistence in the face of rejection. It proves itself through respect, boundaries, and the wisdom to know when caring means stepping back. My heart finally felt peace when I realized that you hadn't stopped loving me when you stopped fighting for me. You had started loving both of us enough to break a pattern that was hurting everyone involved. The most profound realization: your acceptance hadn't been the end of love. It had been love mature enough to let me go so I could find my way back to myself. These conflicting emotions reveal the complexity of attachment and healthy boundaries. When you stopped fighting for our relationship, I experienced every emotion except indifference. Shock, relief, regret, panic, unworthiness, and ultimately gratitude for your strength in choosing health over habit. Your acceptance of my rejection wasn't the abandonment my wounds interpreted it as. It was the boundary that created space for both of us to grow beyond the patterns that were keeping us stuck in cycles of push and pull. Understanding these conflicted emotions helps explain why someone might seem upset when you finally respect their boundaries. They're not necessarily wanting the relationship back. They're processing the loss of familiar dynamics and learning to navigate love without tests and games. Here's what I wish I could have told you when you were deciding whether to keep fighting or let go. I don't know what I want from this relationship, but I know I'm not ready to receive the love you're trying to give me. Your acceptance of that might hurt at first, but it's the most loving thing you can do for both of us right now. The hardest truth about love is that sometimes caring for someone means refusing to enable their unhealthy patterns, even when that refusal feels like abandonment to wounded parts of them that equate persistence with proof of love. Do I regret pushing away someone who fought for our connection? Yes, because I robbed both of us of the chance to build something real before I was ready to participate authentically. Do I understand why you eventually stopped fighting? Finally, and I'm grateful that you chose your own well-being over my need to feel pursued through rejection. Would I encourage someone to keep fighting for someone who keeps pushing them away? No, because real love sometimes requires the courage to let someone face their own patterns without enabling or rescuing them from the consequences. If you're currently deciding whether to keep fighting for someone who keeps rejecting your efforts, maybe the most loving thing you can do is show them what healthy boundaries look like. Even if those boundaries feel like abandonment to parts of them that have learned to equate love with persistence through rejection. Maybe your acceptance of their choice creates space for them to understand what they actually want from love, rather than what they want to test or prove through pushing it away. And maybe real love sometimes looks like letting go so both people can learn healthier ways of connecting. Whether that's together in the future or separately with others who are ready for what love actually requires. But how do you balance fighting for love with respecting someone's stated boundaries? How do you show care without enabling unhealthy patterns? How do you know when persistence is love and when it's refusing to accept reality? These questions require wisdom that develops through experience with both healthy and unhealthy relationship dynamics. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is trust that people mean what they say, even when their wounds make them test whether we'll believe them. If you want to understand more about navigating complex relationship dynamics, watch my video, Why She Came Back Just to Leave Again. That video will show you exactly what drives the on and off patterns that can develop when someone isn't ready for consistent connection, but isn't ready to fully let go either.